further ado, I am Brendan Howe. To my right is staff writer Derek Pyda. To my left is sports editor John Enrietto. This is week 2 of our season, and we're excited to get into the games here. Last week we had a few good ones to get started here. So, John, if you wanted to give your thoughts on what you thought was interesting, that'd be great.
Well, the game that I saw was one of the more entertaining games of the evening. The Butler 35-28 win over Shaler. The Tornado built a 28-8 lead. Only to see the Titans rally back, tie the game, and then Butler scores a go-ahead touchdown with 9 minutes to go in the fourth. Then withstands not one but two Shaler scoring threats late to win the game. Deshaun Cox, and this is one of the beautiful things about high school football. Deshaun Cox is a senior running back on the gold standard. Didn't really figure anything all that much in preseason talks, in the preview interviews, things like that. His name really came up. Right out of the chute, first game, 377 all-purpose yards, 180 rushing, I think it was 121 or whatever it was, catching the ball, 80-some yards in returns. Just crazy. Max Turner threw for over 200 yards. Butler withstood 100 yards in penalties, which I guess is typical for an opening night. Butler also turned the ball over 3 times. Also gave up 240 yards rushing to the Shaler's running back. Still found a way to win the game. So positive note for them. And then the other game I'd like to mention in a negative way locally, Karn City, a game that Derek was at, I'm sure he'll comment about this. The tough loss up at Dubois, 28-7 turnovers, very, very costly to them. But to me, out of the first week, that Dubois Karn City score is probably the most shocking out of all.
Yeah, and you also met your enemy in TV timeouts. You didn't mention that, but Derek, let's go.
I'm gonna get that in a little bit. Don't worry.
Let's go to you, Derek. What do you think?
Mars's win down at Montour. We all picked Mars to win. I don't think any of us thought it was going to come in the manner that it did. They were actually down 19-7 in that game. Came back to win the game 34-26, but Evan Wright led the Planets in rushing last year with a little over 600 yards. Eric Kasparovich, their coach, told me that he had a great offseason, looked incredible in camp, comes out right out of the chute, 150 yards rushing on 22 carries. So, obviously Mars has a great tradition of running backs. They're going to throw the ball more this year, obviously, with that spread offense, but it always helps to have that bell cow in the backfield that you can give the ball to when you need those tough yards, especially near the end of the game. And it looks like they have it this year. 150 yards on 22 carries, great start for him. And John, you mentioned the Karn City game. Turnovers are the great equalizer. You can look on paper and say this team's bigger, stronger, and I do still believe Karn City's the more physical team. But when a team drives down the field, scores a touchdown, and on your very next possession, your very next play, you turn the ball over. That happened twice to Karn City last week. Yeah. The other team takes the ball right down. They scored 2 touchdowns that way. 14 points in the second quarter, 14 in the third quarter. There's your 28-7 final score. Both times. It didn't really, to me, Karn City really didn't start to get pushed around until their defense they were gassed. They couldn't get off the field. Yep. Their offense turned the ball over 2 times. Dubois scored 2 quick touchdowns. There's your 28-7 final. 28-7 final.
A few games that stood out to me were games that we didn't actually at staff. North Catholic and Sarah Catholic down in McKeesport. North Catholic and Sarah Catholic both made deep runs in the playoffs last year. North Catholic's now 4A, Sarah Catholic's down 2A, and North Catholic went up there and they made pretty easy work of Sarah Catholic. They had a big lead at halftime and carried it all the way through. Then Slippery Rock at General McLean, it kind of was the first chance for our cover boys for the football tab, Wayne Mokel and John Sabo, to make their impression this season, and they surely did that. John Sabo had a reception for a touchdown, also a really long kick return that broke a record at Slippery Rock. They were facing a team in General McLean with a new coach in Marshall McCormick, a Freeport grad. He played football at RMU and Slippery Rock. He's only 25 years old, and it's his first year. He's taken over for someone actually that had been there since before he was born. So that was interesting there. But yeah, those were my interesting games this week.
Before we get into the next topics, you mentioned TV, and I do want to bring up TV. The Butler Shaler game last week was televised by Pittsburgh Station, and the game, as a result of rather lengthy TV timeouts, the game went more than 3 hours, which to me, no regulation, and I emphasize regulation, high school football game should go 1 3 hours. It's crazy. Kids standing around for long periods of time. And not just because of that game. I want to make this point. Other than maybe WPIL championship games, state title games, I can understand those games being televised live. Other than those games, high school football just should not be televised live. I mean, you want to televise and do a taped broadcast, that's fine. Or some of these local high schools have their student stations for students to do it and learn about the electronic media, that's fine too. But to me, televising regular season high school football games live takes away from the idea of high school football, which is people from the town coming out, getting together, gathering up, going to the stadium, enjoying a night, maybe seeing people you haven't seen in a long time. To me, if you can stay home and watch that game on the TV, to me, it takes away from the true purpose of high school football. That's just me on my soapbox. I'll step off now. That's what I wanted to say.
All right, shifting topics here, we're going to talk about some things off the field. So last week I got out to Freeport to cover their opener against Indiana. We talked last week. I even said that Jackson Reiser, Freeport's senior linebacker, would be my player of the year. I thought he was going to be really important for the defense. And so I get there, I'm watching warm-ups, and I see someone number 22 I thought was Jackson Reiser. So he's going through warm-ups, and then another 22 comes out and stands on the sidelines. So I'm confused at this point. The number 22 in pads takes his helmet off. I realize it's Zach Clark. So before the game, they announced that Jackson suffered a knee injury in their scrimmage against Slippery Rock the weekend before, and he is out for the season. So his stepbrother, Zach Clark, wore his number, filled in at his position for the first time. He'd never played middle linebacker before, and he accounted for 3 touchdowns in a win. It was really cool. I got to talk to him after the game, and he talked about how much he cared for his stepbrother. So what would you say, from your guys' experiences, the most memorable feel-good high school story you've covered? We'll start with Derek here.
Well, what I thought about actually was born out of tragedy. John, you'll remember this. Back in 2004, I believe it was Labor Day weekend, Mars had a football player named Nick Valenti who went to sleep one night, I think it was on Saturday night of Labor Day weekend, and never woke up. He died. And Mars's next football game, which was only, I think 6 days later, they played up at Union Newcastle. And Mars had a big game. Paul Freese was their top running back. He scored like 3 or 4 touchdowns. Mars wins the game 50-14. But I'm talking to Coach Heinauer and Paul Freese and some of the other guys after the game, and everybody said, that's for Nick. I mean, this was a guy, Nick Valenti was somebody who, by all counts, lived and breathed Mars football. He loved the program. He loved football. He just loved the camaraderie that comes with it. And everybody I talked to, players, coaches, just said Nick was on their mind the whole night. So it's in the end, it kind of ended up being a feel-good story, just knowing how much his kids cared about their teammate. But it was actually born out of tragedy. But a lot of times in sports, that's how it works. I mean, a tragedy leads to something that you really remember on the field or after the game. Talking to those guys, they just they just felt so bad for Nick and his family. But they said that performance that night, which was a big win, was for Nick and his family.
And how about you, John?
Well, this is really going to sound strange because much like Derek's story, I could give you a bucket load of feel-good moments through the years of the things that I've witnessed, had the fortune to witness. But my number one 2011 not football team, Alex Summers was a very popular senior cheerleader for Knock that year. The week leading up to their first playoff game, she was killed in a car accident driving home. Just a local accident, and hit a tree, and she was killed. And her funeral was the morning of that playoff game. First game was Knox hosting West Allegheny in the first round of the playoffs. So they played a game. They thought about, I guess, moving it back a day or two. They decided playing the game that night. Knox falls behind 7-0. They win 28-7. Knox star running back Andrew Rumber Goodwin was Alex Summers' boyfriend, and he plays. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe he ran for over 100 yards that night. And the support that the school community, the town in general, gave to him, gave to the Knox cheerleaders, gave to the Summers family that entire evening. They had a post-game vigil that I'll never forget, where they just let everything out, all the emotion. They released balloons in for Alex Summers. People spoke. There were long periods of silence, a lot of tears. And the football coach for West Allen, Bob Palco, had the opportunity to take his team off field. They just lost, their season's over. Mm-hmm. Kept his team on the field down by the far end zone where it was kind of dark down there, and he's outside. So while this was going, I wandered over to him and I asked him, Coach, do you mind me asking why are you keeping your team out here? And he said, because he said life is not about football. This is life. They're seeing life, and this is powerful. This is emotional. They need to see this. This is the high school football bonding together an entire town in the face of a tragedy and helping them through it. I wanted my kids to see that, and to me, so there's a tragedy. But by far, I've never seen anything like that post-game vigil before or since, and that's my number one feel-good story.
Yeah, and those are both really moving stories. So, moving on here, after winning the D9 title last fall, Karn City fell short in its opener last week, and they weren't the only team that had troubles on offense. Derek mentioned the turnovers on back-to-back drives that kind of did them in. Summit Academy, also it's a different situation, struggled, and they got shut out 49-0 against Newcastle. But my question here to you guys is, how long do you guys think it should take for an offense to find its balance? How many weeks in the season? What factors kind of play into that?
I think there's a lot of variables that work into it. Number one, I know it's cliche, you hear coaches say it all the time, but the reason they say it all the time is because it's true. It starts with the offensive line. What kind of offensive line do you have? You can have skill players who are some of the best around, but if you don't have guys executing their blocks up front, it's virtually impossible to form any kind of continuity in the running game and the passing game. The skill players, are they experienced, or are they new guys? Are they kids that just came up from JV from the last year and you're kind of trying to work them into new roles? I think there's a lot of things that go into forming balance on offense. With Karn City, you look at Karn City, they got experience back in the passing game. They got Eric Boer, they got Michael Roop, they've got Nate Gehring. The running back position, which is always so much a big part of their offense, they've got talent there, but they've got kids moving into either first-time varsity roles or more expanded varsity roles. Kids like Luke Kramer, Levi Hawk, those kids ran the ball last week.
Their entire line is there too.
Right.
Their entire line.
That's the case. Karn City would obviously be more ahead of the curve if they had more experience back on that offensive line. Great coaching staff, though, a strong tradition. I'm sure they're going to get it down at some point. And of course, turnovers. We talked about that. You can look good for 5, 6, 7 straight plays. You turn the ball over and everything's gone. But I think there's a lot of variables that come into play. Basically, it changes from team to team as far as how long it takes to get that continuity.
Yeah, and another team I forgot to mention there was Knock, who is also going through a coaching change. He was excited to see what they could do down at Hampton, and mistakes kind of messed them up too. John, what do you think?
Well, there's so many variables to your question here. Number one, you mentioned Knock. Is there a new coach? Is there a new system in place? How many starters are back in the previous season? All those factors. It's not the NFL where these teams don't get to play 3 preseason games. They in fact only get 1 scrimmage now. They used to get 2 scrimmages. Now they get 1 scrimmage. And so most high school coaches use that scrimmage to look at personnel rather than formulate like any kind of a game plan or starting lineup or anything. They're looking at people still. Mm. So I'd say to me, generally speaking, it takes a couple of games, maybe a little bit more if you've installed a whole new system like Mars has. Although I was impressed by how well Mars played in their opening game, given a whole new system there. Knox to take some time. They overhauled their offense and their defense both. The Meadville coach, Raymond Collins, who Butler plays this week, I talked to him this week. He had a good, he said, opening game of high school, you're always going to have more penalties than you're going to normally have, and you're usually going to have more turnovers than you normally have. And that was true in both Butler and Meadville's case during their openers, and probably some other teams too, because it does take a while. These are high school kids, and they're not going to get it after just one scrimmage to take the field for an opening game.
Yeah, and they're not only worrying about kind of the game plan, but some of them are also going back to school at this point in the year. They have to focus on that as well. So. So now moving on to John's favorite segment of this podcast, our over-under. We looked silly last week. I think all of us went 0-2.
We looked terrible last week, actually. 0-2. The over-under, just to review last week, was would any running back go over 130.5 yards rushing. We all said under. And Deshaun Cox, I mentioned earlier in this broadcast, blew that away himself, and there were some other guys who had rushing games as well. Then our other one was, I believe, 42.5 points, whatever it was, for the combined points for Penn Hills and Seneca. We all took over 17-15 final, 32 points. So we were all did very poorly in that opening over-under segment.
No way to go for that.
That's right.
So we're going to start out this week. We've talked extensively already about how turnovers can shift the tides in games. But my question this week is: will there be more or less than 3.5 team takeaways for any team in our area this week? Derek.
So you're talking specifically about our 11 teams or the other 11?
Our 11 teams. Yep.
Oh, this is takeaways, not turnovers. Takeaways. Okay.
I would think that we have 11 games this week, full schedule for us. I would think at least one of those teams is going to get 4 turnovers. I would think.
You're going over.
I'm going over.
How about you, John?
I'm going under. I think 3.5. Now, if it was 2.5, and it's a scant difference, but to me it'd be a big difference. 3.5. In other words, the local team's got to get 4 takeaways against somebody. There's only 11 chances. No, I don't think it's going to happen. I see somebody, maybe multiple teams getting 3, 4. I think it's too much, so I'm going to gamble here and go with the under.
I agree with you there, John. It's the second week of the season. We've talked about how teams are settling in. They had that first week. They had the scrimmage, as you mentioned. I think the offenses are more put together at this point, so I'll go under there as well. Moving on, I thought this would be interesting, being that Butler had such an offensive explosion last week, and Meadville has the pair of running backs that you wrote about in your preview that are pretty talented. So for that game, 42.5 points, over or under, John?
I'm going over. Even though Meadville, if they have their way, they will shorten this game because they like ball control. They like to run the football. They never want to throw the ball. Their coach said at that time they don't throw the ball at all in some games. But I still think Butler's offense is going to be hard for anyone to handle this year, especially when they get some of their injured people back. But I'm going over. I think both teams are going to score a lot of points.
Derek.
I think both offenses. I mean, is John, you alluded to the Cox kid for Butler. Mm-hmm. He showed his ability last week. We know Meadville loves to run the football. I think you combine those two offenses, I see them putting up, obviously, we're talking about basically 21, 22 points per.
Yep.
I think it's going well over that, actually well over.
I'm going to disagree with you guys. I'm going to say under because Deshaun Cox is not going to be a secret after that first week. If Meadville sees that film and they know who Deshaun Cox is for this game, they'll key in on him. I think with that and combined with the fact that Meadville will kind of run the ball and the clock will be continuously running, it might be hard for both teams to get to that total. I'm going to go under.
This does not look like the tic-tac-toe board that it looked like last week, so that's a good thing. All right.
I could look smarter, I could look stupid. We'll see.
Yep. I know I'm betting on that one. Good.
So now it's time to make our picks and predictions. Our first game up here will be Butler, as we know, is 1-0, had the win over Shaler last week, and then they're going on the road to Meadville this week. Meadville won a non-conference run game against Corey, 55-6, pretty dominating fashion there. So John, let's hear your pick.
Well, Butler's run defense last week was not impressive. I mean, again, they gave up 242 yards rushing to the outstanding tailback for Shaler. But on the other hand, Butler showed they can score a point. But Meadville's got this vaunted wing T, 3 outstanding backs. They got a speed guy, they got a power guy. I think it's going to be the exact same final score as Butler's game last week. But unfortunately for the Golden Tornado, I think it's going to go the other way this time. I'm picking Meadville 35-28.
How about you, Derek?
Well, Kalon, I don't know if I pronounced this kid's name right. Kalon Simmons
yeah.
and Brady Walker.
Yep.
338 yards last week,
Combined,
5 touchdowns against Corey. Now, Corey's coming off a 1-7 season.
Right.
I don't know exactly how much you have coming back, but even if you have stuff coming back, a lot of guys coming back from a 1-7 team, I don't think that's too good news. I do know that it's going to be a stiffer test this week for Meadville against Butler's offense. And I was just impressed I know it's just one game, but I was really impressed by Butler's offense last week, and even in the return game, special teams with the Cox kids. So I'd like Butler to go up there. I know it's a road game, but I'd like them to come away with a 2-0 start. Tornado over the Bulldogs, 29-19.
Okay. One other point, Brendan, before you make your pick, I should have said Meadville state quarterfinalists last year in 4A only loses 1 start total. So that
Sure, now you
about the whole team.
It's locked in. It's locked in.
I want to make sure Derek made his pick first.
29-19.
Okay.
Butler was the only team I picked incorrectly last week. So
You picked Carter City wrong last week.
did I?
Yes.
Yeah,
we all picked Carter City.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Anyways, I think here I'm going to go against them again, especially after John's point there. And the fact that they get to stay at home, I'm going to go Meadville with their run game to win 24-17. And our next game is Seneca Valley, 1-0. They're hosting Peters Township, who beat Fox Chapel on the road 56-0 last week. So, Derek, who do you have there?
Well, Peters Township threw the ball all over. Actually, they threw the ball and ran the ball all over Fox Chapel. Seneca Valley's defense, I talked to Ron Butchley last night. He said there's definitely some things they need to work on there. But the way I look at it, Seneca Valley's coming off a really good situation in that, a coach is going to take a win any way it comes. But when you can win a game where, okay, there's things you need to work on, keep the kids on task. You're not looking at a film where you just blew away the other team 40-0 and everybody thinks, hey, we're the greatest team ever. There's definitely things Seneca Valley needs to work on, and the fact that they're going up against an offense that obviously has some really good skill guys. I think they're going to be more on task this week. Wyatt Craver ran for 120 yards last week, 122 to be exact for Seneca Valley. Looks like he's the guy that can carry the load in that running game. I think that combined with a better defensive effort, I like Seneca Valley to win this game 30-16.
John?
Well, Seneca Valley impressed me last week. Not so much the way they play, but as Derek pointed out, they by far they didn't play their best game, and yet they still found their way to beat a decent opponent. And Peters Township, very strong recent history. Knox coach Tim Burchett, came from there. They've been in the Whitfield semifinals a couple times. They've been in the Whitfield finals one time. So it's a strong program. But I like Seneca playing at home to play better this week. They're gonna find a way to win another close game. Although this is one of many games, including Butler and Meadville, in my view. It's almost a toss-up. But I'm going with Seneca 21-14.
Same here. Ron Butchley and that group of leaders there knows that they were 1 field goal away from losing there. If Penn Hill's kicker makes that kick, then we're talking about a different story here. So like Derek said, they'll be motivated to kind of prove that their offense is as strong as everybody's been saying. I think they'll come out on top 28-24. And our next game here is Knock. John mentioned with new head coach Tim Burchett didn't have the greatest start at Hampton. I liked his quote in the game story of him mentioning he might go 9 weeks without sleep because he's that dedicated to trying to get his team on the right track. So they're facing Indiana. They're traveling to Indiana, who I got to see play Freeport last week. Indiana also has a new head coach. Last year they had a ground-based attack. We talked about that last week. They threw the ball forward 2 times in total last year. Last week, their quarterback threw the ball 31 times, and he actually had a pretty decent game. That game was closer than the score indicated. John, we'll start with you here. What do you think?
We're going to learn a lot about Knock this week. They're playing a team they could beat, maybe we should beat. They're coming off a really rough opener against a strong Hampton team, but 48-0. I'm sure that they're not happy over Knock over that result. But I think the Knights come all the way back from that game last week. I think that they get a big road game. like I said, just following the same pattern. This is almost another toss-up game, but I'm going with the Knights 14-10.
Derek?
Well, it's a luxury when you lose as much from the running game as Indiana did last year. 3,000 yards rushing, they lose 83% of that production at graduation. But they have this kid in, apparently he's pretty good. Trevor Smith is the quarterback's name, threw for 168 yards last week and a loss to Freeport. But that's got to be a positive sign for them. Just going from a running game to a passing game in one season, and you have a quarterback go out and put up those numbers. It's a road game for Knock. They're coming off a game where they got shut out at Hampton. I'm sure they're going to play better this week, but I was just impressed by what Indiana did in the passing game against a tough Freeport defense too. And the fact that it's a team making that transition from the running game to the passing game, he puts up good numbers. I think he does it again. I got Indiana winning this game 34-14.
I'm going to agree with you, Derek, especially being that Indiana had two very long drives on Freeport last week. They both ended in the red zone. The one ended on the 1 yard line. They were trying to hurry. The ball got snapped and bobbled and ended up in the hands of a Freeport player. The fact that they were able to move on, as you mentioned, that tough Freeport defense, and that they could have been closer in that game had they converted on those chances. I don't think this one's going to be very close. Indiana's opening up at home. They're going to be just as motivated as Knock with that loss. I'm going to go 38-7 Indiana. So our next game here is Newcastle. We'll be visiting Mars. We know Newcastle got to face Summit Academy last week, had a pretty easy time with them. Mars had the comeback victory, as Derek talked about earlier. John, what do you think here?
Well, I think Mars sold me last week. To me, that was a very impressive opening win, going down to Montour and beating them in Coach K's first game with the Planets. Newcastle was Newcastle. They blew away Summit Academy, but we all know about Summit Academy's program and what they're up against down there every year, especially in their first game. So I don't put a whole lot of stock into that. I'm sure Newcastle got a solid team, but I like Mars. I like Mars at home. Still another close game. I think we're going to bundle those this week. I'm picking Mars 27-21.
Mm-hmm. Derek, how about you?
Yeah, the game against Summit Academy, I think you mentioned it was 49-0. I think the final was Newcastle got off to a good start last week over Summit. We talked about this last week. Summit's a 118, Newcastle's 4-8.
Right.
I think you could take a lot more stock, put a lot more stock in Mars's win at Montour, which they had to come back, granted, to do. But Newcastle has a lot of talent at the skill positions, but the vast majority of them are inexperienced. Mars has Evan Wright, who led the team last year in rushing, had a big game last week to start the season. Eric Kasparovich, the coach's son, is quarterback, and he had a good game last week. Hayden Mayer is a big player for them at wide receiver and at defensive back. I like the proven commodities that Mars has in bringing into this game, as opposed to Newcastle, which is kind of trying to find guys to fill roles. A lot of them are actually seniors, but the coach told me, Stacy Robinson, he told me a lot of them are seniors, but this is like their first varsity experience. They lost a ton of seniors from last year's team, so all that adds up to me for another Mars win. I got the Planets winning 29-13.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be a packed, crazy atmosphere there at the Mars Athletic Complex. The optimism is renewed there. They're excited probably to see Coach Kasprowicz and his son and all those players from last year play at home for the first time. I think that home environment will be a big factor in this game. Mars will come away with a 28-21 victory. Moving on here, Freeport will be visiting South Allegheny, a little bit of a travel there. South Allegheny beat non-conference Yawk on the road 25-7 last week. Freeport had the win over Indiana, as we talked about. Derek, what do you think here?
Freeport last week, from reading your story, their defense did a lot of bend but not break.
Yep.
Which is fine. If you go out and win a game, that's the most important thing. I think this week their defense is going to tighten up a bit. They're not going to give up as many long drives as they did against Indiana last week in that 28-8 win. I like Freeport to win this game 26-8. Late touchdown for South Allegheny, 2-point conversion. Spoils the shutout. 26-8 Freeport.
And how about you, John?
Well, I got to go the other way here. I love teams in their home openers, especially you got two teams there, as Derek mentioned. They're both coming off impressive opening game wins. I think Freeport They're going to be in a dogfight here. I think South Allegheny is better than people think they are, and I see South Allegheny winning 20-14.
I think with Freeport, having Zach Clark at middle linebacker, and he's played safety before. I talked to Jackson Reiser about that, and Jackson believes that Zach will step in and do as well as he did in that spot. And on offense, as long as Gavin Croney can play like he did last week, he didn't have the flashiest numbers, he didn't have the greatest game, but he didn't turn the ball over. He relied on his running game, which we thought was going to happen. I'm going to take Freeport here. I think that they're going to have some momentum, and they have a reason with Jackson out to kind of be motivated and go out and play for him. So I'm going to go with Freeport 28-7. And next up, we have a clash of two District 9 Titans, per se, with Karn City, who lost their opener, and Red Bank Valley, who was a runner-up in the state last year. Red Bank Valley got to play Smethport at home. Very commanding win there, 53-8 last Friday. Derek, what do you think here?
Karn City, we talked about this earlier. They're got a lot of first-year starters on the offensive line. Last week, I really can't. Their rushing numbers weren't that great, but from like midway through the third quarter on, they were passing the ball to try to get back in the game. They were down by 3 touchdowns. Red Bank's a tough team to try to right the ship against on the offensive line. This is a physical Red Bank team. They, as you said, they lost in the state championship game last year. They have a lot of talent back. This game is at Red Bank on the beautiful banks of Red Bank Creek. The fans are going to be rowdy there. I've been there before to cover games. Pretty unique atmosphere. I just think this is a tough test for Karn City to try to get their first win of the season. I got Red Bank winning this game 24-16.
How about you, John?
I think this has this could be, out of all these close games that I'm picking anyway, I think this could be the best game of the week, potentially. Red Bank Valley blew away Smethport 53-8 last week. The quarterback was 8 of 9 for 228 yards, so they can clearly throw the ball. But Smethport's defense, to me, is not Karn City. As Derek mentioned, he saw Casey's loss at Dubois last week. Turnovers kind of put their defense in harm's way. They couldn't really bounce back or get out of that mess. I think this week's different. I think Karn City, I don't see them going 0-2. They're too much talent for that. As good as Red Bank is, and I know they're good, I see the Gremlins winning a throw. Like I said, it could be the game of the night, 28-24 with KC.
I'm going to agree with you, John. I think Karn City, Derek mentioned they had trouble with the run last week. So maybe they've kind of figured themselves out a little bit with using Eric Boer and using Micah Rupp in that pass game, and maybe starting off with that, trying to catch Red Bank Valley by surprise. Being that this game is going to be so competitive, I am going to take Karn City, who doesn't want 2 losses in a row to start out the season, especially after winning the championship last year. So I will go with Karn City in a close one, 24-21. And then we have Elk County Catholic, who beat Otto Eldred in a close game last week, 35-30. Visiting Montauk, who didn't get off to the start they wanted, but there were some positives in that game. Derek, what do you think?
Montauk is a double-A team. They're in the large division in District 9, as you know, with Karn City, Ridgeway, and Dubois and those teams. This Elk County team that they're going to be playing is in the small division, but they're in the north. The South Division for the small teams is much stronger. That's Union AC Valley, Keystone, Brockway. Much tougher teams, much tougher competition in the Southern Division. This Elk County team's in the Northern Division, much weaker. I think this is just what the doctor ordered for Montauk. They're playing a weaker team. They also get to wait for the team to show up. They got the road trip, the Crusaders do. It's a long road trip, and I like Montauk to right the ship and come out of this with a pretty convincing win. I got Montauk winning 25-12 here.
John?
Yeah, I think I'm following along the same lines as Eric on this game, but I think a lower scoring, a tighter game. I think Montauk is going to have to show the physicality a little bit more than they did last week. I think they'll do that. I picked the Warriors to win for much of the same reason Derek just presented. 15-12, Montauk in a tight one.
Yeah, and there's no disagreement here with you guys. Montauk is going to take this one. Like John said, in a low-scoring battle, I'll go 21-7. Next, we have Keystone at Union AC Valley. Both teams started off the season with a win last week. Keystone beat Coudersport 33-16. Derek, what do you think?
282 rushing yards for that Keystone team against Cowdy last week in the opener. But as you know, this Union AC Valley team is so strong defensively. Got Mikey Card up front, who I don't know if I know you know the name Mikey Card, but this kid's, I think he's 5'7", and he's playing defensive end.
Yeah.
5'7", like 165 pounds, and he's good. He's also a star running back for him too. They got so many guys. A team that has, I think they got like 35 players. So many of their guys played both ways. I like Union AC Valley's defense to put up a much stiffer test than Coudersport did last week against Keystone. And I got Union AC winning this game 32-14. One other point about Union AC's defense, if you do want to pass, they have Skylar Roxbury back there who picked off 8 passes last year. He's a ball-hawking defensive back. Ball-hawking.
How about you, John?
Ball hockey. Keystone's offense, though, is very good. Derek mentioned the rushing offense. Kyle Nels, 25 carries, 142 yards, and 3 TDs for them last week. So they're going to get theirs, I think. But by Union AC Valley, to me, even as strong as their defense is, and it is strong, I think their offense is even better. And I think they will win a scoring fest against the Keystone. They're going to outscore them 34-27. Good game. But Union AC just is too much on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I agree with you there, John. Union AC Valley had a successful year last year. It's kind of carried over in the first week there. I'll take them 31-17. Next is the game that I'll be out covering up in Slippery Rock, where the Rockets get to bring their high-flying offense home in front of a home crowd. John, what do you think here?
Well, it's going to be an emotional night at Slippery Rock. They're honoring the military prior to the game, so there'll be so the pregame festivities are going to be rather powerful there. Slippery Rock's home opener, Mercer's Prep coming off I believe they lost at Fairview, I think 17-7. They didn't show too much offense there. Slippery Rock's, to me, so this could be a Slippery Rock's year. I really like their team. I like their makeup. I like their coaching. I think they win this game rather easily, 28-7.
Derek?
You mentioned Mercier's Prep's offense struggled last week against Fairview, 152 total yards the whole game. It's obviously, you're coming down to Slippery Rock, you're going to have to put up more than that. I don't know if they're going to be able to put up more than that. Slippery Rock's defense is good. I know they lost some pieces from last year, but it's still a good defense, and they got the offense with all those weapons. 36-10. Rockets roll.
Yeah, I see something like that happening too. Slippery Rock's offense is just fantastic. That they have the balance there. I know Coach Larry Wonderu said that they had to find their offensive line. It seemed to have worked last week against General McLean. So I'm going to go with them in another kind of blowout sort of game, 42-10. And next we have Shady Side Academy, who took North Catholic's spot in the conference when North Catholic moved up. North Catholic started with a win last week, as we mentioned. Shady Side Academy has yet to play. John, what do you think?
Well, Shady Side Academy is a rough opener. I mean, they would have been much better to start playing somebody last week rather than having to win this game. North Catholic, as usual, they're loaded. A lot of talent both sides of the ball. Don't think this is much of a game, to be honest. They're playing this game down at J.C. Stone Field, down in North Park. North Catholic rolls, I'm going to say 41-14.
Derek?
Jason Sickett came in place of an injured Joey Prentice last year. It was against a down Valley team. He threw for 234 yards, I think 5 touchdowns. I think he's got something to prove because a lot of people said, well, he played well last year. Valley's down. He played well last week. And I think this is just another game in his opportunity to prove that he can lead a team like Joey did. Joey, of course, graduated. But, this Shady Side Academy team, we talk about opening night jitters, turnovers, penalties can be amplified in those opening games. For Shady Side, this is their first game. They didn't play last week. So, welcome to the 2022 season, Shady Side. You're going to lose 34-6. You're not getting shut out. I gave you a touchdown, 34-6.
Nice.
I covered that North Catholic Valley game last year. Let me tell you, that Valley team looked like it was a Pee Wee team compared to North Catholic. So, Coach John gave a lot of Freeport when I talked to him in the preseason about that division. He mentioned Shady Side Academy is bringing a ton back. But they didn't do all that well last year. So I'm also going to go with North Catholic here. They already have a game under their belt. The offense is rolling. I'm going to take them in a big victory, 35-10. And our last game here will be LiQWYD, who took a little trip up the road to Apollo Ridge last week and lost against Summit Academy, who also lost on the road. So, Derek, what are you thinking here?
Well, I will say this, Summit, at least they're coming back down to playing teams more comparable to them as far as enrollment goes. Last week they played that game against Newcastle. I'm still trying to figure out why. LiQWYD's a much smaller school. I don't think this is going to be a blowout like it was last week, but I still got the Blue Devils winning 27-8 over Summit.
Summit Academy gets on the board. How about you, John?
Yeah, Paul Ridge, as you mentioned, Brendan, they defeated LiQWYD, but only beat them 34-28. So LiQWYD can clearly score. Summit's offense just isn't going to be there yet. May not be there until they get at least a few games under their belt there. I picked LiQWYD to win rather easily, 38-6. I have Summit Academy scoring also.
Yeah, and Summit Academy, last year they didn't get a victory. That losing streak continues into this season. I'm not going to disagree here. I think LiQWYD is going to win pretty handily, 34-2. I'll say they get on the board too, but with a field goal, 34-3. All right, get ready for a pretty stupid pun here. We're going to move from one football to another here with the prep soccer season is underway. I'll be down in Slippery Rock tonight to cover a game. So what teams, I know we have a few that won Whitfield championships last year. What teams do you think will be the most powerful this year? John, we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, it's football in England. It's soccer here. Let's get that squared away here. I think you can't talk about Butler County soccer without talking about the Morris Girls program. I mean, they haven't lost a game in 3 years, which is just absolutely insane. 3 straight state titles. Obviously, the Whitfield title naturally go with that since they haven't lost. They're loaded for bear still again, and I'll be surprised if they lose a game this year. So, believe it or not, they might stumble. They're due to stumble. I mean, the odds are against them, but they just that program is just that powerful, just that good. But you got then you look at the Mars board. You can look at the program down at Seneca Valley. Their boys soccer program. They've been to the state finals 2 straight years. They've obviously done very well in the Whitfield. You got Brittany Greninger, who did a great job at North Catholic with the girls soccer last year. Now she's at Butler now, so she'll have an impact there. The Butler boys team, coached by Troy Money, they opened the year by winning a tournament at Indiana with back-to-back shutouts. You go over to Karn City, where their boys and girls teams dominated District 9 through the years. I mean, it's just no stopping. I mean, you can go on and on. Soccer in Butler County is so strong. To me, it's the premier sport year-round. And as far as high schools in Butler County, if you get to name a sport where, okay, Butler County high schools, what is the #1 sport through the high school calendar year? To me, it's soccer, and there's really not a close second.
Yeah, my introduction to Butler County soccer was in Karn City around this time last year. They faced a Keystone Co-ed team who they beat 16-0. I stopped taking track or tweeting out the goals there. There were so many, so
blow up your phone.
And there's no service there. So, Derek, how about you?
John talked about everything. I had he stole my thunder, everything. But I, not only do we have high school teams that perform at such a high level, but why do we have so many good high school teams? Because these players also play and excel outside of the high school game. They play club soccer, cup soccer. John, you mentioned Seneca Valley boys. They are perennially now in the mix for a Whitfield title and a state title. They've been to the state title 2 straight years, won 2 years ago, lost last year. Mars girls playing for what they hope is a 4th straight state title. Karn City's always in the mix, boys and girls for a D9 title. As you said, we have a lot of good sports teams here in every sport, but if you went, success around the county for each school, soccer is by far, I mean, it's not even close.
No,
soccer is definitely our best sport, and I see no reason why this fall would be any different.
To me, the big question is not so much the powerful soccer teams that we do have. To me, the big question that's what around here is, why hasn't Montauk started a soccer program? I mean, you look at how strong the sport is throughout the county. I mean, you would think that Montauk would have a team. They don't. I'm not sure why that is, but no teams at Montauk.
I think I heard. I don't know if this is true.
It could be a
I
numbers
think-
thing, but I
I
don't know.
think they have a co-op with, I think it's Kern City.
Oh, maybe they do. Maybe-
But, you know,
maybe they do.
if you have enough kids with interest in the game, you can start your own team. But they've never had a soccer team up at Monmouth, so I don't know what the status of that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did want to note that there were no Lima Swede references in this podcast as there were last week. Be sure to check out our Sunday coverage. We're staffing 6 games once again this week, and come back next week for another episode of Upon Further Review, where we'll talk about what happened this Friday, what's going to happen next Friday, and our episodes come out every Thursday on Spotify at 7 a.m. So be sure to listen again.